Time once again for the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast with you as always from the NFL Network, NFL.com. Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell is from the Kansas City Star. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810. WHB in Kansas City, and we are talking Chiefs offense, kind of the state of the Chiefs offense. Can Patrick Mahomes play at an MVP level in 2025? Will the offensive line be a strength? Is Josh Simmons the key to the Chiefs offense? Can Kingsley Suamataia actually replace Joe Thuney? Some interesting comments Andy Heck made to Sam McDowell. Sam will detail here in this episode of the Red, Gold, and Bold. Chiefs talked a big game last year about the deep ball. What's different this year? Why should anyone believe it's going to happen? Should the Chiefs receivers be considered a strength for this football team? How about Xavier Worthy? What do we expect in his follow-up season? Pretty good debut. What will it be in year two? And do the Chiefs need to run the ball better? We're talking about the Chiefs offense, people, and we're doing it right here, right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is a columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Off and running here on a Friday. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember you can be a part of the conversation. Already got people lined up in the chat room, making some comments as we speak. You can be a part of the conversation Fridays. We do it at 10 a.m. Central. So put it in your phone, people. Put it on your calendar and be a part of the conversation. Let's start with the breakdown of the offense, the state of the Chiefs offense, if you will. And let's start at the quarterback position. Jeff, can Patrick Mahomes play at an MVP level again this year? Hasn't really, what did he win it 2 years ago? I think statistically,
22, right?
Yeah, statistically speaking, the first 5 years of the Chiefs offense under Patrick Mahomes as the starter, they were top six every single year. They have been, and that's in both points and yards. They have been mediocrity the last couple of years. I would assume you agree it starts with Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, definitely. And certainly he can play at an MVP level. He's the best quarterback in the league, so there's no question about what he can do. I said this years ago, and it's going to be this way moving forward. As long as Patrick Mahomes is playing quarterback and Andy Reid's calling plays, teams are going to make that the number one priority as far as stopping this team from winning games. And so that alone makes it harder to be at an MVP level every year. And look, I think there's nuance to this too, right? The couple of years ago, the receivers weren't that great. Last year, the protection was an issue. You had injuries to Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown. So I think that's all part of it. And I think he will have opportunities to play at an MVP level again. But I think there are some questions about this offense that are going to make it hard to just predict that this coming season.
Yeah. How about you, Sam? I mean, Patrick Mahomes, for me, I like the way Jeff put it. Yeah, of course, he's the best quarterback in the league. The question really becomes to me as to whether or not he can play at MVP level is, will the players around him be good enough? I mean, that's what this bleeds into immediately. I think we feel like he'll be him if he's allowed to be him.
Yeah, I think that's mostly true, but I also think part of Patrick Mahomes' evaluation of his own season has to be that he didn't play very well last year at times. I mean, we're going to talk about the downfield passing game at some point during this podcast. He missed on some of those shots last year. I recall a game in week 3 against the Falcons last year sitting in Atlanta and thinking, I've never seen this guy play like this. before when he played that way over the first, I think it was 3-4 drives of that game in Atlanta. Of course, they come back to win that game, but I think he's going to have to see the field a little bit differently. I think he's going to have to live with his protection a little bit differently. Like there's some adjustments he has to make too, but your guys' overall point is correct. I mean, when you evaluate what kind of season you think Patrick Mahomes has, it's typically not going to be based on what you think he's going to do, but rather what the guys around him are going to allow him to do. So I think last year we have to acknowledge his number one wide receiver after week 4 was a rookie who was still learning the offense. He had an aging tight end as his number one overall weapon, and he played with 4 different left tackles for a reason because none of them performed at a really high level. And that environment did not set up a quarterback to have a career year a year ago.
I think that environment, I'd go a step further, Jeff. I mean, to Sam's point about Mahomes not playing well, that environment made it impossible for anybody to play well as a quarterback. I mean, the 4 offensive tackles, the losing the wideouts, what the plan was immediately changed in preseason, changed again in the regular season once Rashee Rice went down. Like, could anybody have played well as a quarterback last year under those circumstances? Like, did we see perhaps the worst situation you could put Patrick Mahomes in this organization last year, and they still fought their way all the way to the Super Bowl?
Well, I think we have to be careful and say he didn't play well. You know, I think that he played well. He just didn't play up to the standard we expect from him. You know, what he did was good enough for 90% of the team in this league. They take that all day long. But yeah, I think Sam's right. I think that he has to work on some things. I think there's a dynamic within this team that they've got to figure out probably this season and moving forward, which is one, the quarterback knows he can do all kinds of crazy stuff and sometimes wants to do those things, right? So that he can get himself into positions, whether it's footwork, whether it's moving too quickly, being sped up, that aren't good for him. But then the coaching staff has to stop acting like he can do everything in the world and we can just put him in any situation that's going to end up great. Like they got better as the season went on last year because they started throwing the ball quicker. 2 years ago, they changed the offense to accommodate Rashee Rice. I think sometimes Andy and Nagy, and they get all these big plans in their minds and they want to do all these things and they forget that, well, maybe the other guys aren't that good. And maybe they can impact what does happen to the quarterback. And so for me, that's really part and parcel for this conversation, which is that, yeah, they all have to understand that there's a growth process in this and that, you know, it's not always going to be as simple as pack and make it work.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, Jeff's initial point is correct, that we grade Patrick Mahomes on a different bar, and we grade him on the bar that he set. Based on that bar that he set, I didn't think he played particularly well last year. You know, one example, and we talk about this with all sorts of young quarterbacks when they come into the league, is how do they handle pressure? Patrick Mahomes has made a career out of handling pressure as well as anybody in football. Last year he didn't. You know, his pressure to sack ratio last year, for example, was 17.0%. It had never been higher than 12% in any year. Like, that is a really large jump for a guy that has had plenty of offensive line problems in the past. It's not that last year was unique in not having the offensive line protection.
Well, hang on. Let's don't go too far from there. I mean, you said it's not unique. Wasn't that the worst left tackle and really the only time he had just nothing? We all probably were overly critical, perhaps, of Orlando Brown. We maybe didn't appreciate Eric Fisher. Donovan Smith may have been just serviceable, but last year was a disaster. I don't remember there being a disaster at left tackle. That is a unique situation.
Multiple games. Yeah.
It was a disaster. It was the worst that they've had, but Donovan Smith was one of the worst graded tackles in the league the year before. They had a terrible interior offensive line. And I've pointed out statistics that show that he handles interior pressure much better than he does from the edges. I'm not going to argue that the left tackle didn't affect him abnormally comparatively to the edges, but that's one piece of it to me. Another piece of it is he's going to have to be less risk adverse than he's been. You know, he's as risk adverse as any quarterback is in the league. And I think some of this is going to have to be on him and his mentality. I recall a week 4 game last year, for example, in San Diego, when he threw or in LA, when he threw the touchdown to Xavier Worthy, his first deep pass completion of that year, last year. And on the sidelines, and this was shown on an Inside the NFL clip, Matt Nagy is screaming at him, "Eff it mentality." He's obviously cussing, but he says, "Eff it mentality." He's telling his quarterback, sometimes you got to have this eff it mentality and just throw, just take the risk. And I do think that that's going to be part of his calculus this offseason, is trying to tell himself it's okay to take these risks. We did not consider Patrick Mahomes, for example, a risk-adverse quarterback as a rookie, did we? There were stories about him taking so many risks in training camp, and it wasn't us that fell for it, but there were at least some people who said, this guy's thrown too many interceptions in training camp. He's taken too many risks in training camp. Can this survive in the NFL? Nobody describes Patrick Mahomes' play in that manner anymore, at least not if you're paying attention. He doesn't throw in tight windows. He doesn't throw the ball deep. This is not, I don't want this to be misconstrued as saying that Patrick Mahomes has an issue. I'm just saying, for a guy who came into the facility 3 days after the Super Bowl and asked coaches, where can I get better? This is going to be part of their answer. How can you become marginally better every year? Because that's where we're at the Patrick Mahomes stage of his career, is just getting marginally better. This is the answer. This is how he can get marginally better.
But don't you think that epic mentality is easier when it's Tyreek Hill catching the passes, or it's Travis Kelce in his prime catching the passes? You talk about the deep shots and the tight window throws. That's where those guys, I just think that we take for granted that. And again, I'm not trying to diminish his career in any way, but when he showed up, there were a lot of Hall of Fame players around him. There are a lot of great players who did great things when he just threw it up in the air. Like Tyreek Hill wasn't always just catching wide open passes. There were some, hey, go up and make a play, Tyreek, type moments. And he wasn't throwing those kind of balls to DeMarcus Robinson or Byron Pringle. Like, those were the guys. And so all I'm saying is, when you go through a year, like he had 2 years ago when Xavier Worthy, who was the guy who was around forever from the Giants, who couldn't catch?
Kadarius Toney.
Kadarius Toney dropping passes, when it's MVS dropping passes, then your protection goes south. It's going to affect how you play football.
I totally agree with that point. And my point on that would be, Soren mentioned the stats off the top. The Chiefs have been 15th in scoring in the last 2 years. And because on third down, you can't say, well, Tyreek's going to get open. Well, Travis Kelce's going to get open. I think that's even more reason that when you look at a window, that might be the only window you have on those three, on that set of downs. I look at, for example, turnover-worthy play percentage, the lowest percentage of his league in the league, which, you want that to be low. My point is, there's a lot of data that says it's a quarterback who doesn't want to take a lot of chances. And I think if you're trying to get marginally better, there's a difference between taking a chance 40 yards downfield and taking a chance 3 yards down, thrown into a tight window 3 yards downfield. And it's the former that I think he's going to have to train himself to take a few more of those chances this year.
I agree with you that he has to take those chances, but I do, as we review last year and where things have gone, just the effort mentality. It sounds great if you think the guy's got a chance to catch it. And listen, I want to be clear. I think they've got guys. We'll get to the receivers later. They've got guys that can, but throwing it down to Sky Moore, I don't.
Nobody wants that,
right? Well, that's my point. Is throwing it to Kadarius Toney and throwing it to Sky Moore has scarred him. Okay, They can go sit down to him and say, "Have an effort mentality. Come on, you got to just put it down there." And if I were him, I'd go, "Yeah. Right here, I've done that." I've put balls on a guy's hands in rhythm. Forget about an effort mentality. Yeah. I put it on Sky Moore's hands, and it ricochets 20 yards downfield. I hit Kadarius Toney 7 yards across the line of scrimmage, and he knocks it up into the air, and it goes for a pick six. I got an effort mentality. It's FU. That's my mentality. That's where I think that's great for a coach to sit there and tell him. And coaching's an important part of the equation, and the Chiefs are very good at it. But you get your ass handed to you doing what they're, not even doing what they're asking you to do to stretch the bounds. When you're playing within the bounds of the offense and you don't have people that can just make a simple catch, I don't know how we can expect Patrick Mahomes to be like, you need to just put it down there. Why? This guy can't make a catch off a jugs gun, let alone.
Do you know how many drops the Chiefs had on downfield passes last year? 0.
Well, they didn't throw it.
They did not drop a downfield pass last year.
They didn't throw. Listen, I'm not gonna.
Does that include Xavier Worthy going out of bounds? a few times.
Is that a drop?
Is that a drop?
That would not be a drop. No,
Okay.
but Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes threw him out of bounds. The example of that Tampa's absolutely that Tampa Monday night game. He steps out of bounds when he's got to know where his feet are. In Denver, that's part of my point. Is Patrick Mahomes throws him out of bounds. He misses him in San Francisco. He misses him in Buffalo.
Well, and I think that's what this conversation is about, the state of the Chiefs offense, right? Where are they now? And I think that's a great point. And I think Jeff's right. Like, there are plays that didn't get made that maybe don't show in the drops that they didn't make for whatever reason. And we can point to the offensive line. We know that was part of it. With Xavier Worthy, I think there's hope that all those plays will be made this year, right? Because Jeff's right. I think there was a combination. One, and we dissected that play a lot. The one you're talking about where he stepped out of bounds, and I forget, was that Tampa on Monday night where he went downfield and he cut out left and Patrick Mahomes.
What happened in Buffalo too, didn't it?
It happened a couple of times, but I know
the Buffalo pass was totally on Patrick Mahomes. But the Tampa play was totally on Xavier Worthy.
But I think they're on the reality of a rookie, a guy you don't. First of all, they're on. Again, I will come back to. Why would he trust his guys that he's going to put his foot in the ground and cut out when he's supposed to? He's a rookie. He's made mistakes, right? So you wait a little bit longer till he's completely out of the break. Then you throw it. If now, hopefully they're in sync. Now the offense is designed where he's spending time throwing to him, not spending all of the time throwing to Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown, who ended up going down and not being available. He gets in sync with them, and he'll throw it before he ever comes out of that break, and he catches the football. Like jet chip wasp, Patrick Mahomes threw the football before Tyreek Hill comes out of the break. He knew where Tyreek Hill was going to be, and Tyreek Hill still had to wait on it. There was still a fair catch, but he throws the ball before he comes out of the break. Those deep balls, you can't wait till he's, okay, I'm open, and then throw it. That ball, you have to see it beforehand, and he clearly wasn't trusting Xavier Worthy. Or to your point, Sam, he didn't play well. If it had been a 4-year vet that he played with for 4 years, I'd say Patrick Mahomes didn't play well. The fact that it's a rookie and a rookie that wasn't supposed to be option 1 or 2, I say they're just you can't have that chemistry that fast. And so I think the state of the Chiefs offense this year is those plays should be made, correct? We would all agree with that. This year, there's no excuse. They should, if the protection's there, which it was on those plays, they should be on the same page and they should make those plays, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the issue last year was certainly two guys trying to get on the same page and a quarterback learning to trust where a wide receiver was going to be or how he was going to see a play. That absolutely plays into it. But I think to absolve everything or to put everything on the fact that Xavier Worthy was a rookie, like I would hope the Chiefs don't have that strategy because I think
I don't think it's everything. But I think when you talk about the quarterback and you tell him to go do things, you as a coach have to acknowledge what you were asking him to do. Throw to guys that were either unproven or sucked. I mean, not last year with Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore got factored out pretty quick. But if we're kind of grouping in the last 2 years where they haven't played, and they, how many times did Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore kill the guy?
Well, I think 2 years ago and last year has some similarities in the lack of talent they had at wide receiver, lack of healthy talent they had at wide receiver. I do think 2 years ago, his receivers let him down a lot more than they did a year ago. I mean, they led the league in drops 2 years ago. It was he hits Marquez Valdez-Scantling and probably the most picturesque play that they could have had a year ago. But last year, I thought he had more chances to hit some guys and missed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll talk about the offensive line. Is it going to be a strength after you hear from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete? Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Your favorites are back, Kansas City. Now for a limited time at all your KC Whataburger locations, get the Mushroom and Swiss Burger, 2 large beef patties, Swiss American cheese, fire-roasted mushrooms, and creamy au jus. How about the sweet and spicy bacon burger, 2 large beef patties, American and Monterey Jack cheese, bacon, grilled onions, and topped with sweet and spicy pepper sauce. Or grab the patty melt. Even the honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich. They're all perfect with the Whataburger Banana Pudding Shake. Remember, Whataburger's open 24 hours a day with breakfast served from 11 p. to 11 a. And don't forget, you can get all your Whataburger favorites and more by downloading the Whataburger app with the QR code. Whataburger, proud sponsor of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. All right, let's talk about the offensive line. Switch gears to that. It starts with Josh Simmons or Jalen Moore. I think the upside, obviously, based upon coming out of college, is that Josh Simmons has the upside. Is Josh Simmons the key to this offense, Jeff?
I won't go that far. I feel like the key to the offense is them understanding what they're working with, and whoever is playing wherever along the offensive line at left tackle or at left guard, they understand their strengths and weaknesses, and they're calling plays that allow those strengths to be strengths and those weaknesses not to become huge problems. The problem they had last year was they thought they could go out there and do whatever they wanted with Kingsley Suamataia playing left tackle, and they found out real fast that was a huge mistake. And so the hope for me is that they've learned from that and that they decide that, okay, if Josh Simmons can play, then put him out there. I have no problem with that. I would love the situation to be that Jalen Moore can play and you have time to give Josh Simmons time to develop and grow and not have that knee be any kind of concern on his mind as he goes into his rookie season. But no, I don't think that their fate depends on Josh Simmons, and I hope that they're not putting that on him. I hope he's not thinking that way, because you're going to end up with a Kingsley Suamataia type situation if you go that route.
Yeah. Is Josh Simmons the key in your mind, Sam?
I don't think so, just because unlike a year ago, they have a fallback plan, right? I mean, it's not Kingsley Suamataia or what next. It's Josh Simmons or Jalen Moore. And Jalen Moore, I think, is at least better than what they had at that position last year, if that becomes the option that they need to go with. I thought about this whenever because Soren, this was your question. I think if we had framed like the question or an entire podcast around like, hey, let's rank the players that if it'd be great if this guy had a good season, right? Like who would it be most beneficial to the team itself if they had a great season? And Josh Simmons, without a doubt, is number one on that list. Like if the Chiefs could pick a guy to have a great year, I think Josh Simmons is number one, because it changes his future. It changes what they finally solidify left tackle. So I think in that sense, if you want to use the term key in that sense, you could say, okay, yes. But I think that unlike a year ago, they've given themselves another option to prevent this from being the disaster that it was a year ago.
Let me amend it. Is left tackle the key?
I think offensive line overall, and therefore left tackle. Yes, I think I think this offense, or this team, I should say, has gotten to a place where last year's a great example. They went 15-1 last year before they went to Denver with an atrocious situation at left tackle. And that alone would probably prevent me from saying they have one key to make everything go. But most key, yes, left tackle is number one.
And I think, Jeff, you'd agree with this. I would say that, yes, they were 15-1 going to Denver with the terrible left tackle spot. But, I mean, part of it is they could only lose one more game. But they had about as good a record as you could have had with what they did, right? Like, as we look back on it now, the way it unfolded against Philadelphia, it was kind of remarkable. Everybody around the left tackle and everybody around the left side of the offensive line, Joe Thuney doing his part to try to solidify, at least stabilize the left tackle spot. But that whole, and we can bring guard into this conversation as well right now if we want to, they were overcoming that week after week after week. And sometimes just barely, as you pointed out, Sam. I think it was 6 games that were the final possession.
Final play. And it does final play.
Final play.
Snap of the game. And that does not include the Raiders game, which was the second to last snap whenever the Raiders fumbled.
Yeah. So, I mean, they yes, they were 15-1 at that point, but if everything goes the other way, they look a lot like the year before, right? Record-wise.
Yeah, well, that, and a lot of times the left tackle was not a factor in any of those, the way those games played out. Like Sam said, that Aiden O'Connell dropping the ball, who was it? Leo Chanel blocking the field goal. It was most of the time it was the defense on the field or special teams that ended up making the win happen. Now you can say, yeah, the offense didn't go completely disastrous and they kept them in games, but I don't feel as if that was, we'd be having a different conversation if this was an 11-6 team or a 12-5 team. Certainly, we wouldn't be talking about Josh Simmons comes in and now they're taking off, and we certainly wouldn't be thinking. I don't think any of us here is saying that if they had a better left tackle situation, they would have beaten Philadelphia in that game. Is anybody saying that?
Well, let's say this. If they beat Philadelphia in a close one, we're talking about an undefeated team, aren't we? Isn't that the conversation? Like that's how much that game meant. We had that discussion in a podcast earlier. Like, should that Super Bowl bring the Chiefs back?
No.
And the answer is no, not on its own, but it that coupled with the weaknesses that have been shown before, yes, they are a flawed team, clearly. And so, yeah, to your point, if they had beaten Philadelphia, I think right now we're saying, oh, they solidified their one problem. I think right now, well, first of all, they would have won 3 in a row. And, are they going to win 5 or 6? Like, that game was epic in changing the view of this team.
Yeah, but it's not just, I totally agree with you. But I think when you look at that Super Bowl, it's not just the result, it's the reason for the result. And that game didn't happen in a vacuum. I think we all agreed that that's, even if it's not the same margin, that's if those teams played again the following week, that's most likely the same result. Like I said, even if not by the same margin, I don't think any of us would have been picking the Chiefs to win the game a week later, seeing how that game played out. But I think your larger point, Soren, which I agree with, is that the Chiefs were able to mask a lot of their issues last year. And that's what great teams do. Every team in this league has a weakness. The best teams are the ones that are able to mask their weakness and expose them, have the opponent expose them less frequently than everybody else does. And the Chiefs were good enough to do that. But it didn't mean that they didn't have weaknesses. They certainly were flush with those too.
And you can't do that year in and year out. You can get away with it for 1 year, but then people look at the film all off season and they say, okay, we shouldn't have done this. We shouldn't have done that. We're going to attack it this way. And so, yeah, I don't think, to go back to your first question about Josh, I don't think changing the left tackle immediately makes this an amazing offense. I think they've got a lot of things to figure out.
What if he was really good? Like, what if he is a borderline Pro Bowl level player?
Oh, then it'd be an amazing story, right? But
do you think that, because I think that drastically changes their offense, and I think that's a major if. It's a major if. I just think if that if comes to fruition, though.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. To even go to that level of saying what if he's great means that, okay, it's what if he's healthy? That's where I start with him. And so I think we're jumping into this place of like, oh, Josh, just figures it out. It's going to be.
But I think
going to be healthy.
I don't think we are jumping into that.
I don't. We're not doing that. I'm not saying.
Yeah, no. I know, but I think you're 100% correct. They don't get off the ground on greatness as an offense. Now we'll talk about the defense in a podcast coming up, and maybe there's the ability that this is the steel curtain has returned, and they're going to be number one across the board, and they just need to be okay on offense. We'll talk about that later. But for the offense to take off, if they have hit, I agree with you. Jalen Moore, I think, will be solid, right? I think solid. I don't think there's any ceiling there, or the 49ers would have kept him. They know him best. They would have moved on and put him in or made sure he was somewhere along that offensive line. So I think he's going to be solid. The upside lies with Josh Simmons. And to Sam's point, what if he is a Pro Bowler? If he is a Pro Bowler, this offense, there's no reason it shouldn't be lights out. Because as much as we knock the running game, we'll talk about the running game later, it's kind of like what it's been, at least from a production standpoint. It was pretty much what it's been here for 6-7 years. It's not drastically different. I mean, there is the ability to run the ball when you want to run the ball. But, like, if you look at it, they've invested a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and 2 of their wideouts. They've given money to a guy who was a hot first-round pick when he came out at wideout. They've paid Noah Gray. There is no excuse. And I think the talent is good. The right guard and center are decorated players. Maybe we get to Kingsley Suamataia here, right? Could Josh Simmons be a Pro Bowler somehow without Kingsley Suamataia being at least solid? Or does that wreck any ability for him if Kingsley Suamataia ends up being a sieve at left guard as well? Sam, I know you chatted a little bit with Andy Heck about that.
Yeah, I mean, my question back and forth with Andy Heck, like his answer, I was almost like hoping that he misunderstood the question because I think the phrasing that I asked him, I said, having the benefit of knowing what you know now, like how do you evaluate the last year that you had, the rookie year that you had with Kingsley Suamataia? And he answered it, but then concluded, I don't think we'd change how we did that. And like the Chiefs better learn that lesson because that lesson's coming back at him again this year with Josh Simmons. It's not like that's a one-off situation. Like here we are again. The realistic option last year was that Kingsley Suamataia wasn't ready. The idealistic option was that Kingsley Suamataia was ready. They chose the idealistic option last year. They've got to get to reality this year. Who is the best player? Josh Simmons needs to win the job. And like I said, my hope is that Andy Heck misunderstood the question and maybe he was looking at just the benching and saying, okay, I don't think we'd change the benching that we did last year and make him take a step back because he was ready to be benched a year ago. And you shouldn't change that part of it. But when you evaluate it as a whole, you better backtrack further to training camp and how he was set up to not have the great start to the season that he didn't have.
I'm with you. Like, I don't know how Andy Heck can we agree is kind of timid amongst our questions? Like the first thing that happens, you can see it on his face is, how do I answer this strategically? Not what is the right answer. Like he is afraid of whatever ramifications will come from what he said. And that clearly jibes with Andy Reid because he's been there the entire time. And look, Alan said it, should have been fired immediately for that answer. Said, where was he had one where, Heck's got to go. Like here. I mean, Alan clearly has an agenda here. If the O-line plays poorly again this year, Andy Heck needs to be held accountable. And I don't disagree with that. But I think Andy Heck is as much Andy Reid's a former offensive line coach. Like, I think he's as much, got his marching orders from Andy Reid and follows him.
Sorry to interrupt, Soren, just to underscore that. Like, Andy Reid benched Kingsley Suamataia mid-game. Andy Reid benched Wanya Morris mid-game. It wasn't Andy Heck pulling those guys out of the game.
But it is like, I won't put it on just Andy Heck, but I will say the scout that located Kingsley Suamataia or the offensive line coach that's developed him, somebody screwed the pooch in a big way. And one of those guys should be fired. Right? Like that, like, and in reality, well, I think we all
you're just not allowed mistakes. You're just fired.
Well, I mean, look, if whoever said he's ready to go at left tackle, I'm just saying this. I think Alan's right. I do think that the Andy Reid staff has been continuity, and that has worked. But it was a Titanic disaster last year. And it's like the Top Gun line where the guy storms in after Mavericks buzz the tower and he says, I want some butts. He's not like, I don't care who you're going to go get, but somebody's ass is going to pay for flying by at Mach 2, our tower. That's not acceptable. And somebody's ass has to pay a price for that. What happened at left tackle last year is unacceptable. And I think not just the fan reaction, but I think as an organization, somebody has to either lose all their say at the draft table. And I think what we all think, the reason why we don't want to go there and say that is because we all think it was Andy Reid who championed him, and he's not going to fire himself. And nobody in the organization is going to fire Andy Reid. And that's kind of my point. I don't think Andy Heck beats on the table for anybody. Mm-hmm. I think he's told by either Brett Veach or Andy Reid or scouts that have Brett Veach's ear, this is the guy who can play. And he says, sure, I'll get to work with him. Right. And so I think others had the idea. Do you think Andy Heck is the one who was talking to Louis Riddick and telling him that they've got the franchise left tackle? Because I don't, which means that Andy Heck was carrying the marching orders for somebody else who decided this guy can play. And I think your point, Sam, about we wouldn't do any differently, that's what's scary here, right? Like, what's your vibe? Do you think we expect him to play any better at guard other than the fact that guard's easier than tackle?
I think it's hard for us to develop a vibe because we've never even seen it. Like we saw it for we saw it for like 25 snaps or something in Denver with Carson Wentz playing, with other backup offensive linemen playing. Like that was worse than preseason evaluation because you didn't even have ones going against ones in that game. You weren't even playing alongside starters in that game. You weren't playing with Patrick Mahomes. I just think it's hard for us to have the evaluation on Kingsley Suamataia. And I think the question that is more prone is like, what evidence do we have from the last 5 years? Where does that evidence lead us to what this evaluation should be? And we have evidence that this team puts offensive linemen in positions to where they really hope it works out. And sometimes it does. I mean, they started Trey Smith from snap number 1 at training camp, and he was ready to go as a rookie. But we've seen, like with Kingsley Suamataia a year ago, where it doesn't work out. So I think the history at offensive line with young players has been inconsistent. And so we're going to have to wait and see. But I just, like I said, there's a reason that this answer matters. And look, the answer in the press conference is much less important than whatever answer they're actually giving behind the scenes. But that answer behind the scenes matters because here we are again, starting 2 players that have never had NFL snaps other than the 20-some snaps Kingsley Suamataia had in a meaningless game in Denver. That's the bulk of their whole left side's NFL experience coming into this year at their particular, if it's Josh Simmons at those particular positions.
And if it's Jalen Moore, it's about 5 games.
Yeah. So that's why it matters. That's why the answer behind the scenes matters.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, and it's also, look, I've seen this multiple times throughout my career covering the NFL. It's like the more success you have, Bill Parcells just said, your biggest challenge sometimes is success. And the more you're able to get away with stuff, we've talked about this with the offense overall, the more you think you can get away with it. And so I totally think that they're probably, what I hope is that they learn from last year. But my expectation is that they're going to think, oh, look what we've won in the last 5 or 6 years. Look how many Super Bowl rings we have. Look at how many Super Bowls we've been to. Look at what we've done with this offense with lesser players. It'll work out. It'll be fine. And that, again, goes back to the first thing I said when we started talking about this offense. It's like you have to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, and be willing to be honest with yourself about it. And I don't think that there's any reason to sit here and say Kingsley Suamataia is going to kill it at guard. I think they want him to because they drafted him. And I agree with what Soren says. I think Andy Reid was fully involved in that process. It's his school. He knows the kids. It's a position he played, position he coached. I totally think he thought we're good here. Yeah. And so it goes back to what I was saying about Josh Simmons and a similar thing. It's like if they go out there and they act like none of this really matters, we're the Chiefs, we got Mahomes, it'll all be fine, they're going to have some bad moments again. And guard is easier in the sense if you're not taking on edge rushers, but ask Mike Caliendo how it felt to be dealt with Jordan Phillips in that AFC Championship game. Like you're going to deal with a different kind of animal inside. And I don't know if Kingsley Suamataia can handle that.
That's a great that's a great point that people need to understand. Guard is easier. It's not easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. that is a great thing. To the point about where their mindset and like the success, I thought that was a great point that you made, Jeff, about Bill Parcells saying success is your enemy. And it reminds me of, there was a movie, I don't remember what it was called, and I didn't even see it. I just remember because I felt like the preview was probably the only good part of it. Baldwin.
Is this another 9/11 movie?
No, not 9/11. Alec Baldwin is like a doctor, and there's a line where he's like on trial for something, and I don't know, and they say, you ask, and he looks at it in a classic Alec Baldwin delivery of a line, and he goes, you ask me if I have a God complex? In that operating room, I am God.
Yeah.
Right? And there's, that mindset of like, you ask me if I know what I'm doing? I'm the only, look at my rings. Here they are. Like that does start to get in your head to where you think that like, I want it to happen, therefore it will happen because it's me deciding that it can't happen. If you've been hurt in an accident, make sure you check out Northland Injury Law. Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, serving KC for more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers, helping people with serious injuries from car accidents, work accidents, falls, and other personal injuries. Northland Injury Law doesn't get paid unless they get money for their client. Don't wait, get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222, or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely upon advertisements. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, big talk about the deep ball, right? Like that's one of the things that they want to get back to. We've heard a lot of conversation about it that, oh, yeah, we're going to be explosive and we're going to have the big plays. I want you to hear Matt Nagy, right? This is from what day was this, Sam?
Wednesday.
This would have been Wednesday. This is Matt Nagy talking about them getting the ball deep again.
We talk about talk is cheap, right? You can't talk about it. You gotta be able to do it. So I think it's a mentality of every day in practice, trying to make sure you stress not only the importance of talking about it, but then doing it, in practice. And there were times where we were, but I think it's our job as coaches to emphasize it more and then let these guys go out there. And then their mindset too is, cutting it loose every now and then. And not everyone is going to be perfect and incomplete, but they're it's equity.
What's that cross?
All right, not my best editing job there, by the way. Sorry, Adam. We don't need to hear from you, Teicher. How about it? Like, what goes through your mind when you hear that, Sam?
I heard it last year. I heard it last year, and I saw it emphasized in training camp. I saw Matt Nagy celebrating it when they executed those plays. I don't think this was a lack of emphasis by the coaching staffs. I saw the coaching staffs emphasize it over and over again. We've already talked about the Mahomes aspect of that, and I think it's applicable here, but I'll just point out the result of it. Patrick Mahomes was 30th in the NFL in downfield completions, 30th in the NFL. Those other 29 guys didn't start 16 games. Like, he was behind guys who started for half a season last year, and therefore the Chiefs as a team were, dead last in the NFL last year in downfield passes. It's totally, and I'll believe it when I see it, situation for me.
Jeff, what do you make of those comments?
I think that they always want to be this way. I think they're really optimistic and idealistic in some ways. But I've made this point too on this podcast many times in the last year. Like, I think if they want to be a better downfield passing team, they got to be a better running team. And they have spent the last 7 years, for a lot of good reasons and with a lot of success, relying on Mahomes to create that kind of explosive offense. And you look around the NFL and you look at the best offenses in the league, and what do they all have in common? The most explosive ones. They all can run the football really well, whether that's the Ravens, the Bills, the Eagles, the Rams. Those are the teams that can manufacture explosive plays, sometimes because the running backs creating explosive plays, but also because that element takes pressure off your passing game, takes pressure off your offense, and open up avenues for you to go downfield with the football. And that is what they're putting together again in the running game. We've talked about that, ad nauseum on this podcast, is not really looking like a run game that's going to scare defenses into believing like, okay, we got to be worried about two things here. Defenses are worried about one thing, playing the Chiefs. And their run game was 22nd last year. It was 19th, talking about yards, the year before. It's always been an Andy Reid thing. It's starting to catch up to them when it comes to this part of their offense.
On that point, where do you think the running attack was in 2018, right? When they burst onto the scene, Patrick Mahomes, 5,050. Where do you think the running game ranked that year?
What was it? I don't know.
16. Now, they averaged
different league then, though, right? And different weapons.
Let me read to you a quick stat. When I look at running game, I look at the expected points added per rush. It's how valuable a rush is as opposed to getting 10 yards on 3rd and 20 or something like that. Here's the list last year, the top 5 teams in expected points added per rush. Washington Commanders, number 1, pretty good offense. Buffalo Bills, number 2. Philadelphia Eagles, number 3. Baltimore Ravens, number 4. And I cannot believe Jeff left this team off his list, but the Detroit Lions were number 5.
Yeah, the Lions, yeah.
Those were the top 5 teams in EPA per rush last year. Yeah. They did, and I think this is because this deep shell stuff that takes away the downfield passing game was a Chiefs topic for 3 years. It is an NFL topic now.
Yeah.
And I think the rest of the league, that was their answer to Jeff's point is, okay, if they're going to play that deep, we got to run the ball successfully. Those 5 teams did run the ball successfully. Now, the Chiefs weren't terrible in that. The reason the Chiefs weren't terrible is because they were so good on 3rd and short last year. Kareem Hunt was incredible on 3rd and short plays. Those, when you convert 3rd and short, that's the EPA on those plays is significant. Now you got a new set of downs as opposed to facing a 4th down. But, I think they were 9th, 10th on that list last year. So they weren't terrible at that either. But last in the league in explosive rushes.
Yeah, and I think, Sam, your stat is the best one to look at for running the ball. But I think for people that aren't the stat nerds and are used to, like Eric Eager used to say, well, we don't love the stat, but we all understand the scale. Like passer rating, you would say that about passer rating. It's not the best way to measure a quarterback, but at least everybody, is up to date on it. But to your point, they only had 65 less yards rushing last year than they had in 2018. But I mentioned they averaged 4.8 yards per carry in 2018. Last year, they averaged 4.
Well, do you know where they are in EPA in 2018?
Where were they?
They're 4th in the league that year because the actual quality of those rushes was much more significant.
And where were they last year?
Last year they were 10th a year ago.
So still not off.
Tied for 9th.
And they did,
they weren't.
In 15 games. I mean,
but the irony here is that if you're good in that stat, those teams Sam mentioned, guess what? You're probably going to run the football more.
Yeah.
But you're successful at it. This team, and again, we can argue the stats all we want. The point I'm making is that your offense becomes more explosive as your run in today's game, as your run game becomes more dominant. That's been proven.
I think so. And I agree. I think they do need a credible running game to help accentuate the passing attack. Do they have the receivers? Sam, are the receivers good enough for them? Oh, we want to throw the deep ball. Let's have the effort mentality. Great. Do they have the guys? Because Hollywood Brown has not been a deep ball guy in his career. Rashee Rice has not been a deep ball guy. They're counting on Xavier Worthy, who caught one big one in the regular season and got behind Philadelphia after the Chiefs were woefully behind. Do they have the weaponry to be that kind of passing attack?
Well, the Xavier Worthy, I think overall as wide receivers, if these guys are available, and you have to really emphasize that the if is a real thing with this group, but if they're available, I really think it's the most talented wide receiver room they've had since they traded Tyreek Hill. So what's that been in the last 3 years? And by the way, they went to the Super Bowl all 3 of those years and they won 2 of them. But Xavier Worthy to me is a big piece of this because they brought him in. This week I was going back and looking at the draft scouting reports for what Xavier Worthy was. And all of them were saying, this guy can stretch a defense. We don't know if he can do the other stuff, though. And I think that's the attitude the Chiefs had about Xavier Worthy. And what they found out was he was pretty good at the other stuff. He wasn't like the best in the league at the other stuff, but he caught 59 passes last year. 53 of them were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Only 3 were intermediate, between 10 and 20 yards downfield, and only 3 were deep catches. And I asked Andy Reid about that at the Combine this last year, and he said about the short game, it took him so long to start using that. He said, we probably could have tapped that into that even more. And then he said, and that's my fault. He's saying that we didn't exactly know what kind of player that was. And look, that's part of learning your own players and learning the rookies because they did change him. But I think what's relevant is then we saw in the playoffs, they did start to hit on some deep passes with Xavier Worthy. He caught 3 deep passes that I mentioned during the regular season. He caught 4 during the playoffs. That last one, and Jeff mentions this a lot, was against the Eagles backups. Mm-hmm. But he already had matched his regular season total in the playoffs before he caught that pass. And obviously playing against the better teams in the league. And I think that's part of the product of when you prove that you are a 165-pound receiver who's willing to go over the middle and take a shot, maybe then the deep ball opens up for you because they are worried that you can have this 7-yard route. This 8-yard route becomes a reality that I don't think even the Chiefs thought was a reality when they opened the season with Xavier Worthy a year ago.
I think the receivers are a strength. right? And I think if they have them all out on the field, they will be dangerous. And if they're all out on the field, then you get one-on-one matchups. And we saw when Rashee Rice broke off a route a couple of years ago as a rookie, wasn't even designed to go long, but they started sitting short, and I don't remember who it was. And it wasn't a 70-yard pass down the field, but it was, 30 yards of field position in the air where he got behind somebody. But he's going to be working the underneath if he's healthy once he's done with any suspension he gets. And then I think if you have Hollywood Brown, he's going to be working the underneath. Travis Kelce's going to be working the underneath. And I think Hollywood Brown has the opportunity to then sell somebody. If you get him one-on-one, show the in and go. Xavier Worthy. I think their receivers are a strength if they can keep them all healthy. They now all have had time with Patrick Mahomes. Chemistry should not be the issue, assuming they're all healthy through training camp and preseason. There will be no excuses. And the pedigree of the players are that they're all highly drafted receivers, right? Like, and if you're like, well, you can't count on all. Yeah, Sky Moore's the other guy who was highly drafted that you don't count on. That won't be very good. I think it is a strength and you can count on them. And if they have some effect in the running game, which with a healthy Isaiah Pacheco, you would think they would be better running the football, then there's no reason this offense won't take a major step forward unless left tackle's a train wreck.
You just say Pacheco will be better running the football.
He'll be better than he was last year when he was hurt. He'll be better than Kareem Hunt after his first or second game when he got worn down. Yeah, I think they'll be better. I think if Isaiah Pacheco's healthy, they will be more effective running the ball. Will they be great? No, I think Isaiah Pacheco has more motion than progress. There's a lot of movement and not as much getting down the field. And he has, for his 4.37 40, he likes to quote, he has very few runs over 10 yards, almost none over 40, a couple over 20. No, I don't think he's going to be brilliant, but I think it'll be better than last year. You don't think a healthy Isaiah Pacheco makes their running game better this year, Jeff?
I'm kind of down on Pacheco. I think he was trending downward for me.
Okay.
I've said this, I'm on record. I prefer they'd have a better option than Kareem Hunt and Pacheco. And maybe Elijah Mitchell becomes that player. Maybe if he's healthy, he surprises us and turns into being the Damian Williams of the group and just emerges and surprises us because I think he's got the most potential, the most talent of those three guys. But I think the receivers are a strength. I don't think that I think on paper, it looks good. I think when you start getting into the nuances of it, like how long is Rashee Rice going to be suspended? How is he going to react to playing with this surgically repaired knee? Hollywood Brown, I'm putting him down for some kind of injury because that's what he does, right? And then Travis Kelce is going to be older. I think we've said this before. The offense cannot go through Travis Kelce. And with that not being a factor, how will that affect everybody? Because that's always been the way they've opened up everybody else's through him. He's allowed everybody else to eat. He's been the Nikola Jokic of this offense. Everybody else gets better with him on the floor. With him being a lesser player, yeah, I want to see it first. So even Xavier Worthy, I think he came on at the end of last year. I think he's got some assets, but he's also 165 pounds. And so, again, will these guys all be healthy? I'm not betting on that. Will they all be out there at the same time for 17 games? I'm not betting on that either.
And Sam, I'll say this. I mean, Jeff, I think makes a good point. Hollywood Brown will probably miss a couple of games. I still say Xavier Worthy is small, and so I'm worried about his size. And we know Rashee Rice is going to be suspended. So they're going to design an offense that is going to take advantage of the talents of Rashee Rice. And then they're going to come out in the first 4 to 8 weeks, however long he's suspended, and they're going to put Juju Smith-Schuster in there. And by the way, he'll be hurt 2 weeks into it. So next will be
they do have Jalen Royals as well.
Do you think Jalen Royals will be? I mean, if Rashee Rice wasn't ready to really make a big impact on the first week, do you think Jalen Royals will be being drafted 2 rounds later?
No, but when you look at, the usage for Xavier Worthy, he actually lines up at the X a lot too. And that was my point about how when they had no replacement for Rashee Rice last year, it was like week 11 where they finally went, you know what? This guy we brought in to be the downfield threat actually has to be the guy that helps out the quick passing game. And he was good at it. Those last 7 games, he was at 50 yards per game, something like that.
Can we agree? Then stop talking about the deep ball.
Yeah,
because then
that's right.
He can't be the guy underneath. Well, no, but on the same play, he can't be the guy underneath and the guy going long.
See, that's part of my thing is that I don't think you have to have this Marquez Valdez-Scantling role where a guy just runs wind sprints every play. Like, I think that, yes, having a guy run deep can open up stuff in underneath, but sometimes, like, I think teams this year are going to say, you got to prove you can do this, because there were openings last year and you still couldn't do it, to where I think it's going to become often their best play to run deep. But I think that's going to be because they're going to have to prove that they've got, to Jeff's point, whether it's the running game or to my point, whether it's the underneath passing game with Xavier Worthy is successful enough to open that up for him. But I don't think that I guess what I'm saying is I think it'd be a mistake to pigeonhole Xavier Worthy and say just run these routes or just run these routes. I think he's got to develop into a more complete wide receiver and run them all.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I mean, but collectively they need health, right? We would all agree they need health at that wide receiver position. That will be a big part of the equation. We'll talk defense in a later podcast. Remember, you can support the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast by supporting our great sponsors like Gann Asphalt and Concrete, with free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Northland Injury Law helps you out. Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers. If you've been hurt in an accident, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT 22222, or call 816-400-HURT. And our friends at Whataburger, now for a limited time, get the mushroom and Swiss burger, the sweet and spicy bacon burger, the honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich, and my favorite, the patty melt. Wash it down with a banana pudding shake. Remember, they're open 24 hours, and they serve breakfast 11 p to 11 a. They are always there for you. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. For Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.